The iPad mini 6 might be the most exciting iPad release of the year because it's been over 2.5 years since we got the iPad mini 5. But does it actually live up to the hype? It's a completely new iPad mini with a new design, much more powerful chip, a new display, and upgraded camera and audio systems. So let's talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and see if this iPad mini is a good choice for you. And I'll get to this later on in the video, but there was one particular area where I completely underestimated this device. Now, clearly the thing that would get someone to look at the mini is the size. And what Apple did with this redesign is create a device that's slightly smaller than the iPad mini 5, but at the same time gives us a larger display. Now, I really like this move because it means that I can see more content without scrolling when I'm reading or surfing the web. I can watch videos on a larger screen. It works better for multitasking, and it's amazing for gaming. And I'm getting all of that without losing any of the portability. Now, as far as the design, the mini was transformed from looking like a smaller version of the iPad to a smaller version of the iPad Air 4. Gone are the larger bezels at the top and the bottom. There is no longer a home button, and we now have squared off edges, rounded corners, and smaller bezels. It also means that for biometric authentication, Apple moved the new fingerprint sensor to the power button, which is the same place that we have it on the iPad Air 4. Now, I recommend that you create profiles for both forefingers so that no matter how you pick it up, you're always ready to authenticate. It was a little bit of a bummer that we didn't get Face ID, but it looks like at least for now, Apple is keeping that feature for the iPad Pro. And you'll also notice that the volume up and down controls have been moved up to the top. That might seem strange at first until you realize that Apple needed to keep this side free for the second generation Apple Pencil, which I'll get to in a bit. Now let's talk about the display, which was enlarged from 7.9 inches on the iPad mini 5 to 8.3 inches. This is a fully laminated liquid retina 60Hz display with 326 pixels per inch and a resolution of 2266 by 1488. So it's actually slightly narrower than the iPad mini 5, but quite a bit longer. Now, one question that I want to make sure that I answer is whether this display or this device in general is that different from using a phone. And my answer is absolutely. There's really no question if you're comparing it to a 6.1 inch iPhone. But even next to the 13 Pro Max at 6.7 inches, there's a significant and noticeable difference in essentially any app that you use. And speaking of the iPhone, another question that I get all the time is whether you can use the iPad mini 6 as a phone. And the answer is no. Well, I guess at least not in the traditional sense. You can use it for FaceTime, you can use apps like Google Voice, and you can route calls from your iPhone to the iPad. But it's not going to replace your iPhone for regular calls. Now back to the display, I've been really happy with it so far. It's fairly bright at 500 nits, it's crisp, and the image quality is good. I watched some videos on it and played games, and I really felt like it was a great size, where I didn't feel like I'm playing on a large tablet, but definitely liked it more than playing on a phone. And I'll talk more about gaming later on in this video. Now, one interesting user interface quirk is the padding on the left and the right of the home screen, which doesn't allow you to take advantage of the entire display. It's kind of a strange choice because it's the smallest display on an iPad, and you would think that Apple would want to maximize the screen real estate. It's not really a big deal in terms of the number of apps because I can still get 6 across in landscape mode just like I can on the Air 4. And if you actually look at it, there's larger padding there as well, but it just seems more pronounced on the mini because the display is smaller. Now, as far as battery life, Apple reports that the 19.3 watt-hour battery will give us up to 10 hours of surfing the web or watching videos on Wi-Fi, and then 9 hours if you're using cellular data. Now, that's the same as what we get on the iPad mini 5 and the new iPad 9, and I'll give you more insight into this in my follow-up videos because the battery is still very new. Another set of major upgrades was the camera and speaker systems. Now, starting with the rear-facing camera, we're now getting a 12 megapixel wide versus 8 megapixels on the previous model. And it's an f1.8 versus f2.4, so it has better low light performance. You know that I'm a little bit of a camera nerd, so let me just say that we're also compounding these camera improvements with the new image signal processor on the A15 Bionic chip and the enhanced computational photography capabilities, which is a really long way of saying that you're gonna get better photos and video. Now, continuing on with the camera system, we're also getting a quad LED True Tone flash and Smart HDR3 for photos. Now, while I think these improvements are meaningful, and I like that we can now shoot video at up to 4K 60 and slow motion at 1080p at up to 240 frames per second, I think the improvements to the front-facing camera are just as important, or maybe actually even more important. We're getting a 12 megapixel ultra-wide f2.4 camera, which enables a feature that I've only had on the iPad Pro until now: center stage. If you've seen my demo of this feature before, you know that the iPad can use a combination of the ultra-wide camera and artificial intelligence to track a subject as it moves through the frame and then zoom in and out to keep it framed properly. It's also great to have a better front-facing camera in general, since so many of us are on video calls for school and work. And here's a sample of the camera and internal microphone. Here's a test of the camera and microphone systems on the iPad mini 6. I have it about 2 feet away from me, maybe 1.5 feet. And this is me looking at the camera, and then this is me looking at the display. So hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea of what you should expect your video to look and sound like. When we look at the audio system, we're still getting stereo speakers, but instead of having them both on one side like we're getting with the iPad mini 5, we have one on each side. Or I guess one on the top and one on the bottom, depending on how you're holding it. In any case, you're getting much fuller sound, and when you're watching a video or playing a game, it provides a more immersive surround sound feel than the previous model. Now keep in mind that there's no 3.5mm headphone jack, so you'll either need to use wireless headphones or use a USB-C to 3.5mm adapter. And that brings me to gaming, which was so much fun on the iPad mini. But before I get to that, if you've gotten value from this video so far, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. So I just talked about the new speaker system, and if you're gaming and you're not using a headset, it's much better to have stereo speakers separated in landscape mode so you can detect which direction the sounds are coming from, right? Like, I need to know if someone's coming at me from the left or the right so I can get ready. Now, of course, it's never going to be as good as with a headset, but it's noticeably better than having the speakers both on one side. Now, the size of the Mini itself and the display have been perfect for mobile gaming. It's more comfortable than holding a larger iPad, and at the same time, it doesn't feel like I'm playing on a phone. Now, this is a particular area where I feel like I massively underestimated how much better the gaming experience is gonna be when I compare it to a phone. Because honestly, it's not even close. The A15 Bionic chip is an absolute monster for gaming. And with 4 gigs of RAM, I had no problems running every game that I tried to play so far. Now, gameplay was smooth and responsive, even though we're not getting 120 Hz with Apple's ProMotion. It's not something that I missed on this device, but if it is something that you want on an iPad, you'll need to get an iPad Pro. Or if you're looking at the phone, you can pick up a 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max. I also paired my Xbox controller and then used my Xbox Game Pass to play games via the cloud. And the iPad mini 6 was just flying. If there are any particular games that you're curious about, let me know in the comment section and I'll do my best to include them in future videos. Another area that I was curious about was multitasking and productivity. The iPad mini 6 comes with iPadOS 15. So it already has all the multitasking enhancements that I covered in my favorite iPadOS 15 features video. You can use split view, slide over windows, the new multitasking menu, quick note, and a lot of other useful features that will help improve your productivity. Now, is it as good as using a larger iPad? In my opinion, no. I'd always prefer a larger display for multitasking so I can have as much room as possible when I have 2 apps open at the same time. But the Mini 6 definitely gives you the feeling of working on a tablet, and if you're considering getting this device, you already know up front that you're trading display size for portability. Now, as far as actual processing power, the A15 just crushed any combination of apps that I used at it, and as a point of comparison, like I said, we're getting 4 gigs of RAM, which is the same as what we have on the iPad Air 4, but the Mini has a more powerful processor. If you're interested in benchmarks, the iPad Mini 6 scored 1594 for single-core performance and 4604 for multi-core performance, both of which are significant improvements over the previous model. Another use for the iPad mini 6 is Sidecar, where you can use it as an additional display for your Mac, iMac, or MacBook. And as you can tell by my main workstation, I always feel more productive with additional displays. Now, before I get to the pricing and my storage size recommendation, I want to quickly cover the port and accessories. So Apple upgraded the port on the iPad mini 6 from Lightning to USB-C. So we're getting much faster transfer speeds and we can use more powerful accessories. For example, if you want to edit on the iPad mini and you're using LumaFusion, you can edit directly off of an external SSD without having to copy the files over to the iPad mini and using up that valuable internal storage. And speaking of accessories, because of the new design, the iPad mini 6 is now compatible with the second generation Apple Pencil, which pairs, stores, and charges on the side of the device. Now, personally, I like the shape of this pencil better than the first generation, and I like the double tap functionality. And because the iPad mini 6 has a fully laminated display, we're getting an excellent user experience. Now let's talk about the storage options and pricing, and then I'll get to my recommendations. So the iPad mini 6 is offered with 64 gigs of internal storage for $499 or 256 gigs for $649. Now, of course, there are also 5G options if you plan on getting a dedicated data plan. I normally don't because I pretty much always have Wi-Fi available, and in those rare cases where I don't, I just tether off my phone. But if you want to work or game remotely, then a dedicated data plan is a good idea. Now, as far as storage, if you're a fairly casual user and you plan on using this device to watch video, to surf the web, work with productivity apps, and then play a few games, then 64 gigs should be enough. But if you plan on downloading a lot of big games, or if you plan on taking photos and videos and then storing them on the iPad, then it's a good idea to upgrade to 256. Remember that you can use cloud storage, and at the same time, the internal storage on the iPad is not upgradable. So think about your needs now and for the next couple of years. If you think you're even gonna get close to that 64 gig mark, I would just upgrade because the A15 Bionic chip is so powerful and Apple provides such outstanding long-term operating system support that this device should last you for years. And it would be a shame to have to replace it just because you don't have enough storage. I always mention that I still use my iPad Air 2 that I bought in 2014 and it's still supported by iPad OS 15. Hopefully this video was helpful. Click on my face to subscribe and then watch this video comparing the iPad mini 6 to the iPad Air 4. You know what I always say? Buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.